So back for part 2 with Kim Page of Parents Helping Children. Her email is DHRJusticeAlabama at Gmail, and you can reach her at area code 205-602-5946. And thanks again, Kim Page, for coming back. So we left off last time about we had been talking about some of the funding that was motivating people to break up families and lie in court documents, some of the motivation that's financially based to get kids like streamlined into child protective services and taken away from their actual parents, and some of the amazing amounts of money that is to be made doing it as foster parents or to adopt the children and then sign the children up for disability and other benefits that kick in. And that part 1 was really dovetailing into then about, I think, some of the Great Society programs, but the real motivators for destroying the family structure in North America. And then we were just getting into the issues that come from children being taken away from parents and then having their own families disrupted when they become adults. And then it creates like this cycle of supplying children into child protective services. And I think I did a good job of summarizing. I'm sort of surprised, but you were about to tell us about how this feeds into the prison population. And we see that not just in the African American community with the pipeline from school to home to prison, right? But we see that in white communities as well, in Asian communities. This impacts everyone. So, okay, back to you, Kim. Any thoughts? You were
Well, you said something about the African American community, and we actually did a poll in Alabama. Approximately 74% of children who were removed are blonde hair, blue eyed children. So I
74.
not to
Wow.
74%. Yes. So, not to try to, conspiracy theory it or anything, but I think we had a bout in history not too long ago where somebody really had an affinity for blonde hair, blue eyed children.
Right. Right.
That's one of the things that we've noticed going on with CPS is that's the children that are
Yeah.
majority taken.
So they're sort of highly prized and sought after, and then you see that tracked to Hollywood too, with the not just the stars level, but just maybe average consumption. It's a kind of thing. There's a almost a fetish for blonde hair, blue eyed children that the politicians and the wealthiest. So don't want to be like. Getting into too many specifics maybe, because that would you see what they're interested in.
Yeah.
Right. It's a market. I'm trying to say there's a market, right?
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. But I think when we left off, I was going to tell you about a young woman that I know in Alabama who grew up in foster care. She was taken from her parents when she was young. When she was 13, she was raped by her foster father and became impregnated. Child Protective Services forced her to give her child up. She had no idea what was going on. She had no legal representation. She had no guardian ad litem. In Alabama, a guardian ad litem is the person who is appointed to independently, unbiasedly determine what.
Kim?
Oh, I think we had connection. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear. Okay. The last word was unbiasedly determined, and then it froze completely. It only does that with really good podcast interviews. It always something's going on. It's like me and some other people have been super paranoid because when we're really breaking it down and we're talking about a heavy issue, then it's like constant interference. Sometimes you hear somebody talking on the line. It's just anyway. Back to you. Try again. You were saying that one phrase and then it went. Dark.
So, a guardian ad litem is a person who is appointed by the courts to give an unbiased opinion as to what's in the best interest of the child. In Alabama and in many states, a guardian ad litem is required to be an attorney. In some states, they can just be Joe Blow off the street that's hired by a company that calls them a guardian ad litem provider, what have you. So in Alabama, this young woman who was raped in foster care, who was impregnated, she did not have a guardian ad litem present. Only thing she had was her CPS worker telling her that she had to give her child up for adoption. So the child was put up for adoption, and she goes on about her life in foster.
Oh, she goes, Kim, Kim. She goes on about her life was the last. Wow. Let me see if I have something
She,
else.
yep, this is
No, this looks good. We should be fine. Okay, try again.
all right. So this woman goes on about her life in foster care. She's bounced from foster home to foster home. She goes to girls' ranch to group home until she is legally able to leave the system. In Alabama, the age of majority is 19. So at 19, she's able to leave the system. Now, while she's in foster care, she does not receive adequate health care, and she never in her entire life sees a dentist.
Uh,
So she is 34 years old, and she had recently had to have every one of her teeth removed, and she had to have implants put in because she's had no dental care. She had nobody teach her how to take care of her mouth. Um, she when she left the foster care system, she was 19 years old. She did not have a driver's license. She had no form of identification. When she left Child Protective Services, they refused to give her her birth certificate or her social security card. So she wasn't able to get a driver's license. And she ended up driving until she was 24 years old without a license, without any identification, because you can't get an ID without your social security card and birth certificate. You can't get your birth certificate and social security card without an ID. So she went through this whole loop of how am I
Africa.
supposed to be able to do this? Yep. So fortunately, when she was 24, she went to the DMV and she had a lady um, take pity on her. She told her her situation. This lady took pity on her and decided to go ahead. And even though the lady probably could have lost her job, the lady decided to go ahead and give her an ID. And she was able to get her social security card and birth certificate. And once she got her social security card, she found that benefits that she would be eligible for once she retired, those benefits had been tapped into and there were none left. But she never accessed any of this. Only people that had access to this was Child Protective Services. Um,
They were
she
taking
has three children.
they're just taking her money all along and they're taking her cash right out of her social security account. That's
Yep,
crazy. Probably
yep.
with a court order, right? Probably with some no. So they applied for benefits from the federal government, like Child Protective Services applied for benefits as if they were helping her. Oh, so it's just straight up fraud.
Mm-hmm. They're a
Okay.
guardian. They're her guardian, so her guardian can have the money to be able to support her. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I'm
So they got
sorry.
that money.
To think this is happening in the United States of America is just it's just too much for me to take in right now. I mean, this is one of the more this is a real it's the kind of detective work you do that is really necessary, the energy you have for doing this. Go ahead
It's
and back to your story because I just maybe I think the audience is feeling a little bit whoever's watching this right now is like this is better than Columbo.
honestly, it really is. And I mean, I could go on about this for, another 200 hours and still wouldn't cover everything. that goes on within this business and the system, and how they have lied to the general public to make people believe that they're there to protect children, and if CPS is called on you, then you have to be a bad parent. And the fact is that I can call CPS you right now. I don't have to identify myself, and I
Yeah.
do not have to provide any kind of proof. I can just say it. I can say that you're Osama bin Laden and you've got a gun to your child's head, and they're going to come to your house and investigate you just because I said so.
Right. I think that people do this who are I think we have people in our society today who use child protective services to make trouble for other people. And I have some solid reasons for thinking that. When you think about like people calling these simple numbers to complain at the city about somebody's yard is too messy, or they didn't rake up their leaves, or whatever you want, you can get your neighbor in trouble. And really easily you just pick up the phone and you can say anything to them. And by the way, like the other thing you were saying prior to that, think about the terminology: child protective services. So you're talking about a child, and everybody wants to protect children, right? Or the elderly, the most vulnerable of our society. You want to protect a child. And then protective, that's a good feeling word. It's like you think, oh, that has a connotation of something really good is being done for this child. And then it's a service. It doesn't say corporation, it doesn't say
Hmm.
company, it doesn't say money making shakedown of taxpayer dollars. We're going to rip off the Social Security fund, and we're going to do all this fraud with Medicare or Medicaid. It's child protective services. It's got to be good, right? It sounds so nice.
Yeah,
Oh,
it sounds so nice, and that's you know, wolves in sheep's clothing. The most horrific, evil people that we've ever discovered are evil are the ones that are, just oh my gosh, they're so beautiful. I mean, look at the actors and actresses
right,
in Hollywood who have been exposed on Epstein's list. These
right,
are the people that are the most well respected in the world, and they're the most beautiful people, and you would never think that Tom Hanks would be out there, diddling little children that he
right,
purchased from Child Protective Services. But
right.
unfortunately, he was on the list.
Well, it's the people that have been telling us that they want to save humanity, or they want to put down President Trump, or they want to stop the ocean levels from rising. And they're talking about saving the world, but there is a thinly veiled aspect of totalitarianism that lies below everything they do. We're supposed to uh, eat bugs so we can stop the ocean levels from rising, but they're still buying mansions with oceanfront property. Obama's not going to give up his mansions out on Martha's Vineyard, just because he thinks the ocean levels are going to rise. It's just not happening. So the
Right.
hypocrisy of everybody saying that they're looking out for us, and we're just living on this earth for a while, and they have power and totalitarian control, and then to have access to other people's children. And there's another element to this I don't think we've ever fully explored, and this is completely off topic, but why is there such big business in abortion? Like, why is there such a fascination with, and I'm not talking about abortion rights. I'm just saying, like, couldn't people just agree that abortion's dangerous to a mother's body? It might do harm to her uterus. Don't we want to avoid abortion to begin with? They talk, maybe there's something going on with all of those body parts. I mean, and maybe there's an interest in the fetal tissue for conducting research, say in a laboratory where they need stem cells. So there's a level of exploitation to a lot of things that people claim are going to be in our best interest, or something we should fight for, like child protective services. You know, what's the alternative? How about letting people keep more of their value? I mean, sure, drugs, alcohol, violence, violent crime. There's a lot of things that happen in people's lives that society can't do anything about. But when we're talking about the money that gets thrown down on trying to take people's children away from their parents, that's a destructive thing set in motion that goes way beyond like each individual instance, and it spirals out into the future in ways that nobody could even perceive. When you start talking about destroying the mother-child bond, you're creating
Mhm.
all these little sociopaths, you know
Narcissist. Yep.
you know
Yep.
you take the father out of the family and then there's no discipline. I mean, there's energy that comes from the mother and there's energy that comes from the father, and children kind of need both in some way or another. But there should be grandparents around or other family around that can do that. To take all their roots away
Yep.
destroys the civilization. So is it about power and control at the end of the day? It's about
It,
power.
I, believe so. I believe so. Honestly, I do. And you were talking about the abortions and the. Um, this is just a theory of mine. You can take it for what it's worth, but we have the late term abortions that are being pushed now, and I've looked into the process of how the late term abortion happens, and they talk about putting the same drug that they use to do the death penalty. They inject it into the unborn baby's heart to stop the heart. Well, where does that baby go once that
Yeah,
baby is delivered? Is
right.
that baby actually dead? And where does it go? The mother doesn't get the baby. She doesn't get to take the baby home with her and plan a funeral and bury that child.
Oh,
That infant's body stays there at the facility. So is that child actually dead? Or did they just administer a paralytic to make it appear that that child's dead? And they're now putting that child into the Child Protective Services system, they don't have a parent that can come and fight for that child and waste the money of child protective services in fighting that parent for the child, because at that point the child has been abandoned. If that child is still alive and the mother leaves that child there, that child's been abandoned. And in every single state there is some sort of safe haven law where you can actually take your child to a fire station within the first few days of life, drop it off, no questions asked. The baby's, yeah, we don't care who you are. We'll take care of the baby. Is that not a similar situation? What's going on with these partial birth abortions?
It makes me wonder too with the abortion laws where they'll have like a abortion after, well, they'll have abandonment after where they'll put the baby in the corner and let it cry and decide what to do with it later. So presumably the mother departs the scene and that's abandonment as well, and they have a fresh baby. And
Yep.
there's no accounting for the corpse or the body or who, is there a certificate of death? The child is left in the corner to die, or the child in a third term trimester abortion, if they remove the child and the mother's just whisked out of the room, how do you even know the baby really died? Maybe they just induced birth and the mother's probably gassed or she's been injected with something to make her unaware of what's going. She's being treated like a farm animal is what's going on. It's like
Yep.
in veterinarian science you'd have more regard for a calf being born from a cow, or piglets would have more rights being born from a sow on a farm. There's like laws about protecting animals. It's
Mhm.
phenomenal. Um,
And
so
the thing is a death certificate doesn't get issued unless a birth certificate had been issued. And if there was no birth, there's no birth certificate. If there's no birth certificate, there's no death certificate. So that child technically never existed.
yeah, it was just a clump of tissues,
Hmm.
or it's just a
Yeah.
clump of cells.
Yep.
So It's funny that we can't even have these conversations about what actually happens. I've been curious for a long time about placental tissue. Like when I discovered that it turns up in some like items that commercially available items, and what happens to a woman's placenta. Only women can produce a placenta. So when you see some cultures have a tradition, and they'll dispose of the placenta in a kind of a funeral or respectful way because it's part of the birthing tissue. Other societies, other cultures have a process where it's eaten. And I know that may sound strange to, in North America, but they'll have a ceremony, and they'll actually cook it and prepare it and then ingest it. And it's a great big world, but it's thought that if you let somebody else have the placenta, we froze up again here. Can you hear
No.
me? Oh,
Hmm.
there you go. So some of the cultures think that there are special spiritual or magical qualities to the placenta, and that if you allow someone else to carry it away, there'll be some kind of magic or witchcraft that could be done over the placental tissue that would have control of the mother or the child. It's just a great big world with a lot of different traditions. But what happens to this tissue if you're talking about stem cells or baby brains? I mean, there's a lot of research that can be done with that stuff, and a lot of organ transplants, and maybe there's somebody waiting for a kidney for their baby, or there's somebody waiting for a heart transplant for their baby. And given all the corruption in the world and the system as it is, maybe there's some black market for things like that. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it's actually interesting that you say that, Wes, because there was a young lady, I believe she was 9. Um, she had a very, very, very rare illness. Now, this is not a young lady that I ever had anything to do with her case. This is an associate of mine. Told her story. She actually spoke to the mom. My associate, is a journalist down in Alabama, and she did a story about this young woman, this young girl. She had a very rare illness, and they were in Atlanta. There was a doctor at Emory University who was doing research on this very rare illness. When I say it's rare, it's like one out of 100,000 people have the DNA to even be possible for this illness to manifest. And then I think it's one out of every 1 million actually shows signs and symptoms of the illness itself. So it's extremely, extremely rare illness. And this little young girl had it. And the doctor at Emory University was insistent on the mother letting the child be part of his research study for an investigational medication and treatment for the illness.
Huh.
And the mom didn't want to do it, or did not want to do it. So this doctor called Child Protective Services on the mother and had the child removed from the mother
Wow.
and placed into foster care. And immediately, Child Protective Services signed all of the documents that were needed to be able to allow this child to participate in the research study, even though the mother had said no. The
um,
child was taken into Emory University. The mother would actually have to visit her daughter at Emory University. And after, I think it was about 13 months of the child being in the hospital at Emory University, all of a sudden nobody knew where the child was any longer. The mom wasn't allowed visits. She wasn't allowed to get updates about her child. Nobody knows anything about the child. The child is just up and disappeared. There's no evidence of death. There's no death certificate that has been issued, but nobody can produce the child.
uh, so when you're um let's spend a little time talking about how having knowledge of these sad facts um, could actually be turned to knowledge to how to change the system. Because, I mean, these are really horrendous occurrences. I mean, just a 9-year-old vanishing at a hospital, right? What could be done to possibly turn this around so that Child Protective Services is held to account, and I mean a public reckoning, so that they're not allowed to lie on documents. They can't lie in court. Maybe unpack the cases and take a look at them again. No more just ransacking people's homes and grabbing their kids. Is there something? What is it gonna? Is the answer gonna lie in education? Conversations like this. Should it be at a corporate level where we find some financial motive for keeping parents and kids together? Or should there be a governmental, maybe there should be like a series of committee hearings, say in St. Paul or in Alabama, and just talk about cases and have experts give testimony about issues with Child Protective Services. I mean, what are we going to do to turn this around? Because this is really hard stuff to hear. And
Well,
anybody hearing this is going to want to know, well, what can I do about it? Like, how can I help? Is what people are going to
well,
be thinking.
biggest the biggest problem with why Child Protective Services is allowed to do what they're doing is because the family courts operate under confidentiality. They say that parents are not allowed to talk about their case, because we don't want your child to have the stigma of people knowing that your child's a foster child. So you're not allowed to talk. Even though a gag order is unconstitutional, it's against the First Amendment of the Constitution, judges will issue gag orders against parents. So they're not allowed to talk about their own case. If you had a Child Protective Services case, if I'm not a party to that case, and what I mean by that is a party to the case is a person who is included in the actual court documents, the lawsuit itself. If my name is not attached to that, I can't come to court with you. We have a bill that is being introduced in DC right now that is going to change that. We have a lot of people that are working for that so that we can have advocates in the courtroom with parents. But the biggest issue is parents are scared to talk. They are terrified to talk. And the reason they're terrified to talk is because the judge says, I'm going to put you in jail if you tell anybody what we're doing to you. I'm going to ensure that you never see your child again if you tell anybody what we're doing to you. So what could be done? You're running for office, and what you could do should you get elected is we need some sort of provision in our legislation in each state. We need legislators that are willing to put a provision in that allows for these cases to be made public, that allows for cameras in every single courtroom, especially if it has to do with the child. There are ways that we can protect the child's identity without closing the case off 100%. If the case goes to the appeals court, every single case is public. Every single case. If a case goes to the appeals court, they don't say Bobby Johnson's case. They don't talk about Bobby Johnson and Sue Johnson and Danny Johnson as his parents. They talk about BJ. They talk SJ as mom. DJ is dad. They don't talk about the child with his actual name. They have no identifying information in the case. That can be done in the case with Child Protective Services in family courts. That can be done. There are ways to protect the child's identity without violating the trust that we as the people put into our government or into our courts. We have the lady Justice the Scales. She's got a blindfold on. She's supposed to be blindfolded so that she doesn't see anything that can bias her. But unfortunately, our justice system, our legal system has made that blindfold there so that they can hide. That blindfold is to hide, not to say, let's keep us from being biased. So the biggest thing is we need to be able to make it easier for parents to speak up. We need to make it easier for parents to be have a place that they can talk without feeling like they're going to go to jail. I cannot tell you how many times I have had police pull me over standing in the parking lot of a gas station or a fast food restaurant because you've got warrants all over the place. I've never had warrants. I don't have warrants, but you've got they'll radio. Oh, can we arrest her on this? Can we arrest her on that? Because they don't like me being out there talking to these parents and exposing these things. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. And I'm standing there with handcuffs on the, in a Burger King parking lot because they're mad that I went to court and had a picket sign talking about Judge so and so with family court is trafficking children. They don't like that. So
Yeah.
it's use exercising your First Amendment right is the biggest thing, and being able to give these parents the legal right to do so is the biggest thing. The other thing is we have a huge lack of education, a huge lack of education. Back in the days of Little House on the Prairie, when Mom and Pa were there with the kerosene lantern, and there were two books. There were two books that you saw in every single home. One of them was the Bible. The other was Black's Law Dictionary. Black's Law Dictionary is the law of the land. Now you go up to John Q. Public and say, "Hey, you ever heard of Black's Law Dictionary?" And they're going to look at you like you've got a horn come out of your head. What is that? They have no idea what it is because we don't educate people anymore. If we had education, then people would know that what's being done to them is illegal.
Yes.
But we don't have
it. Isn't that astonishing? And also, I think another reason Black's Law Dictionary isn't in any homes anymore, much less a courthouse, is that it demonstrates that, that was Black's Law Dictionary. Every founding father and mother would have had that in their home. Everybody who participated in the writing of the United States Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, they all had Black's Law Dictionary in their home. And we had to snap and create a disconnect between that beautiful tradition in the English language and our current existence, because that English language background from England, Black's Law Dictionary gives us the sense of our being rooted in Western tradition, Western civilization, which is based on Christian, Judeo-ethical traditions coming out of Black's Law Dictionary. So it's that our rights are derived from God. The king doesn't dispense that to us. So all that began with the Magna Carta and going back to earlier documents, but there's foundational documents that we've been snapped away from that cultural background. Everybody on earth wants to come to the society that was created by that ethical tradition. Everybody wants to break into the United States, but nobody wants to accept that Black's Law Dictionary. I'm glad you gave it a shout out, that in the Bible. So we're sorely lacking in an awareness of our fundamental rights as Americans, and as far we get further and further away from that. So we need to strengthen parental rights, and I think you have a couple good ideas there. So there's education, there's an education component, and then the other thing was having transparency in terms of the process, so you can see the names of people involved. And there's nothing to prevent a judge from lying, or a lawyer from lying, or a doctor from lying. We usually think of these professions as being very authoritarian and powerful professions that we look up to and respect. And maybe we need to get over some of that a little bit. When we just came through COVID-19 and we learned that the medical profession is controlled by dollars, shocking, surprising, right? So trust the science is a little bit dishonest.
Mhm.
So the judicial system, probably the same. Is there anything you'd like to say, like in closing? Because I think this has been a great conversation, and this is like a perfect place to sort of wrap up. Because for me, this is great. I think we should do more sessions in the future and talk again about cases and whatnot. But um, I'll just say Kim Page, Parents Helping Children. Reach her at DHRJusticeAlabama@gmail, and you can call her at 205-602-5946. And I'll give you the final word, ma'am. Do you want to go ahead, ma'am?
Thank you, so I guess the only thing that I wanna say is that just because Child Protective Services knocks on your door and becomes part of your life doesn't mean your life is over. There are ways to fight them. You can get your children back. You can stop your family from being destroyed by this evil business. You just the biggest thing that you have to remember is your voice is the thing that they fear the most. So if you are willing to stand up and you're willing to shout out what's happening to you and your kids, and you just keep shouting and you don't shut up until something changes, that's when something's going to change. It's when we keep quiet that things that we don't want to happen to us. That's why this country's in the state that it's in right now, because too many people are complacent and they just say, well, we'll let Bob do it. We'll let Sally do it. We'll let John do it. I don't really want to get involved. And it's that not getting involved that's made this possible for people's children to be trafficked.
Thank you very much, Kim Page. Thank you very much. See you next
Thanks.
time.